Who here has actually married their let's get married if we're still single by 40 person? And what's the story? I may be a little late to this party, but my wife and I went to high school together and never dated. We were movie buddies and I had a little crush on her. We did make out one time at a party. I was a year ahead of her. And right before I graduated we made a pact to marry each other if we were single in the distant future. Can't remember what that date was. But fast forward 20 years. We reconnected on social media and 2 years later we were married. About 5 years later we were going through some boxes and I found a cheesecake photo of her from 1987 with a note written on the back saying how she can't wait until our wedding day. We had both forgotten about the pact until we found the picture. Then about 6 months ago, my parents cleaned out their attic and gave me a box full of stuff they saved. Inside was a note from my ex in high school, and in the ramblings of teenage angst she mentioned that she had a vision of my now wife and I together. Odd for an ex to say, but we had a good laugh about that. Tomorrow is our 12th anniversary. Thanks for letting us walk down memory lane for our anniversary. A friend made this proposition to me several years ago. I said, no. Even if I'm still alone I will only marry for love. About a decade later we got married. Things are good and we didn't even have to wait until we turned 40. So basically, my wife that I had spent my whole life looking for passed away. My kids persuaded me I was actually in love with the woman I made this promise with years before. Even though she was not right for me at all, and that's how I was part of the worst ending to a TV show of all time. I have a closely related deal. When we get old, if both our spouses die first we become roommates. My grandma had jokingly said she'd ask some guy she knew to marry her the next leap year if they were all single. When it became apparent that he was expecting this to happen, she asked my grandpa to marry her instead. Our agreement was if we were both single in 2000. I kinda had a crush on him anyway. He found a lovely girlfriend. They got married. I was invited to the wedding and was kinda heartbroken. He had 2 kids with his wife. I later found my husband, and I wouldn't trade him for the world. Now my pack mate is divorced from wife and dating one of my best friends from our college friend group. Life is weird. OP. I think you need to add a serious tag. I did. The age was 35 and we kept bumping down the age to 27. It took us a long time before we got the courage to tell each other that we wanted more than being friends. We were so afraid of the other one not feeling the same way. But life has worked out better than I imagined. We celebrate 9 years together next month. Made a deal with one of my longtime friends that I dated in middle school. I moved. And we kept in touch periodically. While I was in college. We renewed the deal. But then I was in a long-term relationship. And she eventually got into one as well. However, as mine ended, tragically, her BF of 3 years took his life. It really messed her up, as she was the one who found him afterwards. Our friendship never really was the same. And she hasn't dated anyone since, only hookups, but refuses to settle down or try dating again. Our renewal ended this past fall. And I tried seeing if she wanted to meet up since it had been over a decade since we last saw one another. But just seems we've drifted too far apart. Edit, spelling grammar. Aside, I didn't marry mine. He is committed to lovely man. As a woman, I think it worked out. My senior year of high school I made a deal like that with a friend of mine. If we were single by 30 we would get married. Well, we ended up getting married 3 years later. Had this with a girl I kind of dated years ago. I'll call her M. We were able to travel some together. Always got along. But we weren't official. We eventually went our separate ways for life reasons and made this deal for age 60. Not as cute and romantic as most stories here. But the idea was, we travel well together. And I could get old with you. Fast forward 13 years of only sporadic contact. I was getting divorced and M was in a 4-year relationship. We live in different states now but start talking again on the phone and become good friends. I get into a relationship with a new person I fall head over heels batshit crazy in love with. About 6 months into that, M's relationship ends. My relationship starts slowly turning south. Turns out my new love has a personality disorder. I had never heard of it. But it is really hard to maintain a relationship after the honeymoon phase with someone who has it. Over the next year, it goes from my best relationship to my worst. And collapses in spectacular fashion. M is my confidant through this. Just a friendly ear. Never inappropriate. I was pretty broken hearted. I had a birthday trip to Europe planned that I had wanted to take with my now ex. I decide to go alone. 2 weeks before the trip, I was texting M and jokingly said, "You could tag along if you're not busy." She said, "Yes. I want to come." In possibly the fastest reply I've ever gotten. We kind of sheepishly agreed we should swap selfies. That was a funny convo. It had been a long time. She was just as beautiful as I remembered. Apparently. I also passed the selfie test. And she bought herself a ticket. We flew separately. The first time we saw each other, in almost 15 years, was when she hopped in my rental car at an airport 4,000 miles from home. We had the most wonderful time. We never talked about if the trip was just friends or not. Just went with it. It turned romantic the second night. We talked on the phone when we got back and she said, "I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait for 60. I think we should explore this now." I agreed. That was 4 months ago. We talk every day and I've gone to see her 3 times. She has a job interview in my city soon and is coming to spend the whole week. We're in our early 40s now. Life is crazy. Opposite happened to me. Made a pact with a girl I had been friends with for several years. We were both awkward and I felt a good pair of friends at the very least. I brought it up. She agreed. Went out and found a husband about 6 months later. I was happy for her, but sad for me. After that she stopped taking to me and I haven't spoken to her in 20 years. I hope she's still doing well. My best friend in high school and I had this. Everyone thought we were joking, both girls, but I think we were pretty serious. We are still best friends and both in very fulfilling relationships with men who understand how close we are, and honestly I'd love to live in a giant house with all 4 of us forever. Might not actually be married but it's pretty damn close. My person ghosted me a few years ago. I just turned 36 today. We were enemies in elementary school. Frenemies in middle school. Then friends who dated very briefly in high school. Continued to talk and catch up with one another in our 20s. Then nothing. I can't even find him on social media anymore. To disappear so completely after all of these years worries me. Is he in jail? Dead? I'm not looking for him out of some fear that I did something wrong to offend him to make him want to cut me out of his life. I just miss our friendship. And if something has occurred, positive or negative, that motivated him to move on without me in his life, I would like to know. I still look around the internet for him very so often. Catfish style. Just in case I do ever find him again so I know that he's alright. I hope you see this someday. Marcus. I miss you. I made this pact with my best friend and unfortunately he died with the Boston Marathon bombing. It still hurts a lot. The originally what happened with my auntie and uncle. They've now been together now for a good 25 years now. My aunt. She met a friend a long time ago at a festival and always said I'm never going to marry someone, and he thought the same, so they said if we ever meet again. Years later they both saw each other at the same festival again and now they're married for a little over a year. My dad and a lady had this agreement. We moved in with her and her 2 kids, about the same age as me. They fought all the time. The boy and I didn't really get along because he just wanted to get high on basically whatever he could and I would get made fun of and or given the talk for hanging out with the daughter. Lose-emo. It all kinda came to an end when a big fight escalated between the boy and I. then the my mom to be and my dad, and then ultimately my dad and I. We ended up moving out and I hate that time in my life. We're not married yet. Mainly because of financial reasons, but we agreed to get married when we turned 30. Both of us weren't in the best place and feeling hopeless and lonely. It got us talking about our relationship. At the time just friends. In a serious context. And helped a lot with the blues we had been feeling. Turns out we really enjoy each other's company. We spent a lot of time on Skype while playing video games and texting while at work since we lived 12 hours apart at the time. He told me he loved me one day and I decided I loved him. Long distance for something like 8 months. Living together nearly 4 years. And expecting our first child in June. Honestly, I would say our favorite thing is still hanging out together and playing video games. But on the couch together with our pets. We made the deal for 41 when we were 22. He's engaged. I'm 24. Woman I met in high school and dated off and on, agreed to get married to each other if we were still single at 30 years old. When we were both 29 we got engaged to other people. We've always been friends and kept in touch, so my fiance and I went to her wedding and she went to mine. We'd run into each other from time to time and our kids attended the same school. Fast forward 20 years and I run into her at a coffee shop. I ask her how her husband is doing and she said they've been separated for a while. She asks me how my wife is and I tell her we've been separated for a while. We are now dating and have been for close to a year. She's a wonderful person and we both feel very fortunate to be with each other. I didn't make the pact directly, but I married the guy who was asked to make a pact with another girl. At 19 I was really good friends with 2 guys and one of them was friends with another girl. Let's call her Kelly. So 4 of us. One guy. Let's call him Kyle. Kept asking me out for a year and a half and I didn't want to ruin the friendship. He chalked it up to me needing time and that I would eventually fall in love with him as friends marry each other all the time. At the same time the other male friend. Let's call him Rob. Was asked by his female friend Kelly to enter into the if we're single at 30 let's get married pact, to which he politely declined. I have a couple horrible relationships. Swear off dating until I'm 22 in a private conversation with Rob. He makes a bet I won't be single by the holidays, which were 2 months later. After I was in a vulnerable situation. In which he graciously rescued me like a knight in shining armor. He professed his love. I felt a spark I had never felt. We started dating at 20. Lost the 2 common friends. Got married at 26 and have been married over 5 years. I never believed in soulmates, but man oh man, it's hard not to sometimes. My crush once said, if both of us are 40 and still single. Me, excited. Let's commit suicide together. Mayo. Edit, grammar. Didn't end up married to her. Thank God. When I was just out of high school I had this crush on my friend. I'll call her Mandy. At the time I was young and dumb. Didn't know enough about girls to realize Mandy was just using me between boyfriends. I was totally in the friend zone. Basically she'd spend my money and use me for emotional support when her current guy did something to upset her. I can remember feeling hurt the time Mandy said she wished I was gay so we could really talk about guys. I didn't say anything. Just wrote it off as nothing important to think about. After a particularly bad breakup Mandy called me all sobbing and devastated. She felt like this guy was really the one, so now that he broke it off, it was always the guy dumping Mandy. She was worried that no one would ever want her. Next thing I know she's telling me she wished just one of her boyfriends was more like me. Then Mandy tells me to promise her that if neither of us are married at 35 we'll get married. It sounded reasonable at the moment so I agreed. I was married 3 years later to someone else. Mandy is 44 now. Never had a guy propose to her and very single for a reason. After meeting someone else I was able to see Mandy from a different point of view. What I had mistaken for confidence and self-sufficiency was in fact the reality that Mandy was a stubborn bitch and was so spoiled as a child that her adult mind thought it was totally okay to use other people. I've been divorced for several years now. Sometimes wonder what would happen if I reminded Mandy of our promise from 26 years ago. The reason I don't is I'm pretty sure she doesn't remember, and if I brought it up she'd have some STTY comment to say about it. Am I the only one who thinks 30 is way too young for a marriage pact? I'm just over 30 and I feel like I'm just hitting my prime. I did. Just this past September. We met in the late 80s. I was a stylist and he was a client of mine. We became friends. He was the nicest person I've met. It was like I was choosing a family member. We joke that if neither of us are married by the time we're 40, then we'll do the deed. We stayed friends, and when my roommate moved out, he moved in. We dated other people for about 2 years until Becky started hitting on him. And I didn't like that at all. So I told him, I don't want you dating Becky or any other gal except me. So I gave him a BJ and we lived together happily for another 15 years. We were past 40 then, so we said we'll get married when it's legal for gay folks to get married in our state. Well, that happened. And his pension grew and he was worried I wouldn't get it. So we got married. It was supposed to be transactional, but when the judge was doing the ceremony, it was actually awesome. We both felt like we were levitating about 6 inches off the floor. Me. We agreed on 30 though. We had dated in high school and into college for 4 years. Life just kind of made us go separate ways, like countries apart. Would occasionally keep in touch throughout our early 20s. Both of us went through multiple bad relationships and made a joke that if we were both single by 30, we would get married. He came home for Easter one year and asked me to go on a date for old time's sake. We made it about 5 minutes into the date before we remembered how much we were missing out on with each other and what we had had. Got married the following year. Now we're 5 years in with a 3yo and sitting on the couch, each of us on Reddit, and debated who should post this story. Edit. Thanks for quadrupling my karma. Guys. Not married yet. I knew he had a crush on me for a while, but I wanted to be on my own for a few years. I didn't believe in love at the time and was against it due to childhood trauma. Drunkenly told him one day that we should get married if we were still single by 35. And he said he was down. After a while, I realized that he was the one that was always there for me, did right by me, showed up, would leave food and giant bouquets of my favorite flowers on my doorstep, a key romantic stuff etc. I could go on. There was no doubt in my mind then that he would treat me right. One day, I decided to spend the night and I haven't slept a single night without him since, except for work trips. I've become immune to his loud, incessant farting. We've gone full weird on each other. We finish each other's sentences. And we can't wait to pop some babies out. This man was not only friend zoned, he was bro zoned. Now, I want 10 of his babies and can't imagine my life without him. This thread helped remind me I could have missed out on something great like this had I not given it a chance. We dated in high school but kept in touch. But we lived in different states and she kept a lot of secrets about how bad things were going in her life. She passed away from drug abuse last year. I'm 37. I don't know if I should feel like I dodged a bullet or feel like I failed her as a friend. Edit. Wow, thank you all for the kind words. Upvotes. And my first silver. Yup. 30 was our agreement. But we found ourselves both single in our 20s and thought, what the heck? Let's give it a shot. Dated for nearly 5 years. And we're about to celebrate our 13th anniversary of marriage. I kinda made that deal with a friend jokingly. We said when I turned 30, he was about 10 years older, I never found him even remotely attractive. Just funny. I totally forgot about that until I turned 29 and he brought it up. He took it seriously. I didn't. I lied and said I was dating someone seriously, and after that he stopped talking to me. Edit. Since people think that I broke some sort of a promise, I didn't. He said it jokingly to me. We weren't great friends or anything. More like co-workers who kept in touch after we both left that company. Also at the time he was married and I had a boyfriend that I thought would last forever. I was 20. There are a bunch of incels on here. Jesus. I'm actually sorta going through the beginnings of let's see what will happen right now. We had the if we're 30 pact and we are both 27 but ended both being single and going through bad breakups for the first time at the same time since we were around 16 or so. She is my oldest friend and we've known and lived for most of the time within a block of each other for almost 21 years. Over the years things have sorta happened but didn't go anywhere. We hung out on Saturday which sorta turned into the best date I've ever had in my life, and while I was driving us home she told me she loved me and I was too stunned to say anything because I didn't expect it out of her. I am the touchy-feely one, she is not, and she was well aware I've had feelings for her for years. So now I'm at the point where I'm just trying to get the courage to ask her about all that. Mine is getting married this year to my ex-boss. Just before we both turn 40. And I'm officiating the wedding. I don't think I'll ever meet anyone I click with mentally, emotionally, though not sexually, as well as I do with her, so it's bittersweet. I haven't found anyone. But I'm beyond happy for them and I get to be gay uncle, so it works out. My current boyfriend said this to me before we started dating. I thought it was really cute until 2 years later in our relationship I found out he said it to another girl too, while we were together and seemingly happy. It really messed me up to the point I don't even like to think about marriage anymore.